Our next story is also to do with China, and it begins with a flashback. The year is 2015. Chinese President Xi Jinping was on a visit to Britain. He was given a royal welcome in London, and I mean this literally. The Chinese president rode a gilded carriage to Buckingham Palace. He was treated with the best food and wine. In the background, Scottish bagpipers played Chinese folk songs. The Queen herself was toasting with Xi. Now, all of this indicated Britain's political priorities. If they're flaunting the Queen, it means you're important. Back then, David Cameron was the Prime Minister of Britain. He always advocated closer ties with China. In 2015, he took Xi Jinping out for beer and chips, almost like two buddies meeting up after college. Cameron then declared a golden era in relations with China. Listen to this.
This visit marks the start of a new era. Some have called it a golden era in relations between Britain and China. An era of stronger economic ties, deeper trade links, closer relations between our peoples, and meaningful dialogue on the issues that matter to us both.
How wrong he was. Today, relations between China and Britain are near rock bottom. In fact, it's an election issue in the UK. Both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak are promising a tough line on China. Sunak fired the first shot. He called China the #1 threat to domestic and global security. And now Liz Truss has joined in. She plans to officially declare China as a national security threat. How would that work? Last year, Britain conducted a foreign policy review. That document called China a systemic competitor, not a rival, a competitor. Liz Truss plans to do another review if elected as the Prime Minister. She wants to designate China as an acute threat. Now, to give you some context, Russia is also designated the same way. For the UK, Russia is an acute threat, officially. It tells you how Britain's policy has evolved in 7 years. In 2015, China was seen as a partner, hence the golden era. By 2021, that sentiment changed. China was declared a systemic competitor of Britain, and pretty soon it could be declared a threat. Rishi Sunak himself has changed his position on China. Initially, he supported closer ties. As finance minister, he led trade talks with Beijing. He even came close to signing a deal with them. But Sunak, the prime ministerial candidate, is much tougher. He sees China as a threat. And now this pivot raises a couple of questions. Number one, why is it happening? And number two, what will it look like? Let's deal with the first question. The China of 2022 is not the China of 2015. It's a lot more assertive, a lot more aggressive, and a lot harder to do business with. Take Hong Kong, for instance. In 1997, it was handed over by Britain to China. They were promised one country, two systems. But 2 decades later, that promise has been broken. Hong Kong is effectively a Chinese province. Same in Xinjiang. More evidence has emerged of the atrocities against Uyghur Muslims, about forced sterilizations, systemic rape, and human experimentation. So Britain, like most countries, had a choice: ignore the abuses in favor of trade or rethink bilateral ties. Right now, Britain is going with the second option. And don't mistake this for righteousness. This is more about playing to the gallery. That's what London is doing. Another reason is Brexit. Since 2020, Britain has lost its clout in global politics. It's not a member of the European Union anymore. For a former empire, that is bad news. This is a country that craves for political relevance. In fact, that was the whole point of Brexit. So what does Britain do? Plunge into the new geopolitical flashpoint, the Indo-Pacific. They have a history of doing this. In 2003, Britain blindly followed the US into Iraq. Other European powers stayed away, but not Britain. And we all know how that ended. 19 years later, they're doing the very same thing, following the Americans into the Indo-Pacific. Last year, Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced new deployments to the region, 2 patrol vessels for at least 5 years. He also deployed a carrier strike group to the South China Sea. It was led by HMS Queen Elizabeth. But the biggest move was AUKUS. Britain joined the US in creating a new military pact for the Indo-Pacific. They agreed to share nuclear submarine technology with the Australians. And all of this indicates a pivot. Clearly, the era of chariot rides and beer is over. The question is, what comes next? A quick decoupling looks highly unlikely. China-UK trade is worth more than $100 billion. Out of this, imports to Britain are worth nearly $73 billion. So the trade is stacked in China's favor. Same with investments. Last year, Chinese companies pumped $4 billion into the UK. And that sort of trade cannot be abandoned overnight. Having said that, Britain seems way ahead of Europe. The EU, you see, is still struggling to define China. Is it a competitor? Is it a rival? Is it a threat? Their member states simply cannot decide. At least Britain's leaders have some clarity. More clarity than the EU, certainly. Chances are their China policy will mirror America's. What does that mean? It means more patrols in the Indo-Pacific, tougher statements on Taiwan and Hong Kong, sanctions over Xinjiang perhaps, and trade and investment curbs in the future. Remember, the UK did ban Huawei from their 5G infrastructure. As for China, it's a point to ponder. 7 years earlier, they were seen as partners. Now they're being called a threat. It tells you that there are limits to economic and commercial power. Trade is not a substitute for political alignment. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.